Okay, this one will be about the meta-I concept I developed in college out of curiosity. And this occurred because we were studying dynamic control systems, electrical engineering, 4 years, college. And it seemed to be obvious that evolution designed a sophisticated control system that controlled and adjusted its refractive state continuously to the accommodation system. So I'll call this meta dynamic I, since it has nothing to do with medicine, farsightedness, nearsightedness, none of that. It's just what you actually measure objectively. No interference of optometry, medicine, and so forth, because that's all that they do. Not intentionally, but still the same thing. So I tried to do a literature research to find the meta-I concept in medicine. It is not there. I was working at a radio station, and you read the meters every half hour as required. It's in a blockhouse in the middle of the field. And I was graduating from college, and I saw a statement in a women's magazine about submariners develop myopia based on the time in a submarine. It seemed obvious to me that all completely normal eyes would do this. That if you live outdoors, your refractive state will measure as positive. When I say positive, I mean measure yourself. Any scientific study would be the person measuring his eyes positive, even when he had 20/20. That would be part of the conditions of a study. So that led me to ask, what the hell's going on in the medical world about this situation? What did they think? Have they ever heard of a meta-I concept? It's like metaphysics or metascience. It's above and beyond, or never part of medicine, never part of medical thinking. They absolutely can't think that way. It's now measuring your refractive state. As long as my refractive state is positive, I have 20/20, and I use a Snellen and a plus lens to determine how positive it is today. Of course, as long as I'm reading 20/20, it has to be positive, but I must measure myself. And anybody in the scientific program should be prepared to do that. Measuring is a refractive state. It takes a little time to learn, but if you want science, is what you would do. Engineering and science. And look at the scientific data, the meta science. And the correlation with that is very good. In any event, so there's a guy in New York wrote the article on submarine or so forth, and I wrote to him. He responded and said that there was a optometrist in Ohio, Cincinnati, who was thinking that way. And okay, what is this man thinking about? The plus. And fortunately, I was in Columbus, Ohio, and had the chance to drive over and talk to him. I think he's about 91 years old. So I'll call this review Raphaelson, Jacob Raphaelson, 120 years later, and nothing has changed. Absolutely nothing. So it's clear to me that the submariner who previously 20/20 refractive state changed to negative could have got himself out of it, but he'd have to use a plus for near. But of course, it'd take a very brilliant submariner to understand and do it. So that was meeting Raphaelson. And Raphaelson thought the plus could be used to slow it down. Of course, to me, in 2040, I don't want to slow it down. I want to get my refraction to go positive in 2020, even though the price is that I wear the plus for all close work. And I make all confirming measurements personally, because you can't do this with a retinoscope. Matter of fact, the retinoscope is poor accuracy versus me making the measurement myself. I don't see any other way to do it except that I do it myself. So that would be a scientific study. In getting the data, I ask to be fair-minded. And of course, I knew everybody's against the concept that the eye is dynamic at birth, control system, because they don't study it. It's not a subject of study in 4 years of optometry. They don't need to know it because the minus lens works and the public is ignorant as hell. So why should you try to help the public that's ignorant and wouldn't do it anyway? You're wasting your time, is the way they think about it. So I've taken some excerpts from Raphaelson's commentary and posted them. And they show the same thing, that the public in ignorance does not want prevention. And they don't want to do it, which I understand. It's doing something. Prevention requires deep intelligence and acceptance of the meta-eye concept, because it's either or. It is not cure. It is avoiding when you previously had 20/20, which you confirmed yourself by measurement. And now you've gone from plus to minus refractive state. I'm not going to call things errors and defects when they're not. What you measure is a refractive state, whether plus or minus. And that you'll see that in the primate data always. Except intellectually, optometrists will not allow even the concept to be published of the meta-eye. They don't want it to exist. And I can understand why. You can't help an ignorant person with science, with prevention. Unless they have the concept, they're not going to do it. Perhaps Steiner gets somewhat closer. He has a person measuring when he's like 6 diopters, find the point of blur at 6 diopters, and the conversion is direct. Minus 6 diopters, reading is 6 inches, so that works. But it's too late, vastly too late to do anything about it when you let yourself get that far down. So the concept of using a Snellen and test lenses with a desire to measure your refractive state as positive is science. And it's objective and it's repeatable. I can measure anytime I want to and get the same results. The only difference is, for instance, Rupa Wong. She uses a complex lens star measurement tool, which will show their kids' refractive state is positive. I always say positive because I expect you to do it. If you don't do it, you're not going to succeed. Now, let's see. I talked to Raphaelson. It's 1966, I think, and I was concerned about my immediate relatives. Now, they're indifferent. I mean, we all are. As long as we have 20/20, we're indifferent. We don't care. We want someone medical to fix us. It's a common attitude. Nothing wrong with it as long as you're 20/20. And they kept their 20/20. But the real issue is that delicate thing where you go from 2020 to 2050. Then it becomes a matter of, are you serious? Do you understand the meta dynamic eye concept? If you do, you may help yourself, but you will be making the measurements exclusively. There could be monitoring you, general checking, but it'd be an engineering scientific program under your control. So the result of this was that, say, Raphaelson 120 years ago, the result was that I'm sure my immediate relatives wondered what their uncle was doing. Certain of that. They knew I was nearsighted, seriously. And they see me now with 20/20, self-measured. And I think probably the only person who really learned from Raphaelson or the meta eye concept was myself. Because I applied the concept to myself. I mean, what else am I going to do? As far as I'm concerned, meta eye concept will be excluded from all medical publications and all optometry publications. And the public will not like it. And that's a justification. I'm prescribing for an ignorant public, and they're not going to understand, so I tell fibs. What else can I do? The public would not understand scientific truth, the meta eye concept. So once you put a person in a minus lens, that's it. It's over for them. They're not going to prevent, they're not going to avoid, and they're not going to get out of it, as far as I'm concerned. That's the closest to the truth you'll ever get. That's why I measure myself. Any scientific study you'd have the engineer making the refractive measurements, even when the refractive state measured as positive, meaning they can read the 20/20 line to a plus half diopter lens. So that is Raphaelson 120 years later, and absolutely nothing has changed at all. And unlike it will change for the next 120 years. Add your own commentary. Thank you.